I am a human being and I killed human beings.
Before I knew it, I'd fired 4 shots at the door. I kept on shouting for Eva to phone the police.
Tests are underway to determine if a serial killer is on the loose in Centurion, Pretoria.
The dead won't bother you. It's the living you gotta worry about.
Good evening, folks. Welcome once again to Profiler Africa. And tonight we are welcoming a broader audience as well. We'd like to thank all of the folks that follow our friend Tshego Paledi to the show as well. And we'll be saying hi to her in a second. I'm Paul Llewellyn, of course, and tonight we're doing something a little bit different. No deep dive into a single case. No deep forensic breakdowns. This week we're sitting down with one of South Africa's most prominent true crime creators to get a behind-the-scenes look at what it's like to cover some of the most disturbing stories in the country. Our guest is Tshego Paledi. She's a YouTuber, a storyteller, and the woman behind one of the most recognizable crime platforms in South Africa with over 44,000 subscribers and growing. We're here to find out how she did it, to pick her brain a bit ourselves. Before we meet her and before we say hi to Gerard, let's meet her, shall we?
Hey guys, my name is Tshego. And welcome to my channel, Telling the Told and Untold, where I cover true crime cases. So if that's something you're interested in, please do check out my channel so you can see all the different types of cases I have covered and will continue to cover, as well as my facial expressions. And I'd also like to think that I'm a little bit funny, so respectfully. So if that's something that you're interested in, I highly suggest that you please check out my channel and become a part of our little true crime family. I mostly cover South African cases. However, I am going to start covering international cases as well, which is really exciting. So please do subscribe and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Hey. I absolutely love it. Awesome. Okay, well then, let's not beat around the bush. Let's say good evening to Tshego.
Hi, how are you?
Great. Welcome. Great to have you here.
Hello to Gerard as well. Good evening, Gerard. There you are. Coming to us all the way from Vancouver tonight. And now let's do this.
Fully daytime over here, unlike you guys. So good to be with you. Glad I could make it.
There we go. Good evening, Gerard. Okay, guys, so here we are. It's lovely to be with you. I mean, it's so nice to have a fellow YouTuber here. I mean, me and Gerard are fairly new to the game of taking this YouTube thing really seriously. Although we've been at the podcast for a few years, for the first few years, it was a little bit erratic, to say the least. But since we've settled in, not only have we been enjoying this journey ourselves, but we've been enjoying kind of discovering the world of true crime creation that's out there, and also getting to know other creators, because I'm a firm believer in the fact that, it's about community, isn't it? And we must all kind of uplift each other up. So that said, Tshego, let's start off simply by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself, and tell us what it was that kind of led you on the path to doing what it is that you're doing with your channel.
Okay, well, hi everyone. My name is Tshego Paledi, and I'm a South African true crime YouTuber. I think a lot of people don't know, but I'm actually a qualified and registered social worker. I'm just not practicing at the moment. I was born and raised in Rustenburg, and I started my true crime channel 5 years ago, actually, during COVID. I really liked crime. I think a lot of people like crime. I think my crime was just a higher level than other people's, and I was obsessed with the UK true crime YouTuber. And I noticed that a lot of people don't cover South African crime cases. And even when I was like in high school, there was a true crime show that came out, and they spoke about the sugarcane serial killer. And every time I tried looking for it, I couldn't find it, and I started to give. I was was crazy. So I just wanted to be the person that bridged that gap and start talking about those cases.
Absolutely. I think everyone's got that one case that's kind of hooked them in on the true crime genre. Mine was actually the Stuart Wilkin case, when I was in the Eastern Cape in the 90s. What was it for you, Gerard? Well, I mean, what kind of
Sure.
got you interested other than being a student of all this?
I think, I guess the first big South African case that kind of intrigued me, was probably the Norwood serial murder, because that was sort of, end of my high school, early varsity days, given my way, was kind of one of the big ones that kind of was in the news, that was being covered. There was a fair amount of footage on the news about it in, say, 1992, when the case kind of really broke. So I think that was really what made it something South African for me. Before that, it was always like you think of these weird stuff as always been outside of South Africa. So yeah, probably the Norwood guy, to be honest with you.
Yeah, for sure. True. What was it that motivated you to start a channel specifically on YouTube on this particular? or was it YouTube? What platforms were you drawn to, and where did you actually start building an audience? I don't know if people, I think a lot of people talk about digital content creating, and there's a lot of people out there doing it, but there's a lot that goes, and we've been experiencing that, a lot that goes into just getting it set up, being in the right places, understanding all the different platforms and how they best kind of complement one another. What was your kind of path to finding, where your voice was best fitted, where your voice best fitted for you?
Well, I think like how I mentioned, how I was obsessed with a UK true crime YouTuber, and then I was a bit
Okay.
scared to start on YouTube. I think a lot of people are scared because there's so much work that goes into it. And I remember I told like a former friend, like, "Hey, I want to start a YouTube channel," and then they kind of just like laughed at me, and that really demotivated me. And I got myself a ring light. COVID happened. I was home, so much time, and I just decided to start. I remember I spoke to my brother about it, and he had a graphic designer friend who designed my logo for me. And then after that, I just started. I feel like if you don't start, if you keep telling yourself you're going to keep doing it, then you'll never do it. And you just have to like jump in and just try your best. I did a ton of research about thumbnails, just how YouTube worked. And I just started. And at first, I really didn't get a lot of views. I think the most views I'd get would probably be like 100. But that was enough for me. Every Saturday night, me and my mom would sit down at the table and I'll tell her about this case. And then she'll tell me, okay, don't tell them this, don't explain this. They can go do their own research. And then I'd film Saturday nights, edit throughout the morning. And then Sunday, 2 p.m., I'd post. And that was just my COVID life. And then I just blew up one day.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a range of skills that you need if you're kind of doing the lion's share of the work yourself.
Yeah.
How was that for you, kind of getting to kind of grips with the tech that you needed to be able to get yourself up and online?
It was just a bit tough, but I feel like whatever you have, you just start. Whether it's like, even if you don't have ring light, just take your phone. If you can find a free editing app, and you just learn as you go. I think a lot of people will look at my videos from the beginning, and then you compare them to now, and they're completely different. But you're just constantly learning and growing, and if you don't put in that effort, then you won't be better.
Yeah,
And I've
sorry,
realized
Jared.
from listening to Paul, because he does all the technical stuff. I just pitch up and talk. There's a lot to it. It's not just, yes, you can do it, and I think many people just start their way, put up something on YouTube every now and then, but there's a lot of like science, and if you want to use that word, or technical stuff behind it about when you post, how to increase your
Yeah.
views, how to do this, the algorithms. Have you kind of gotten into that, or have you just kind of just carried on doing what you do, and you don't really pay attention to the more technical side of how to really tweak your show?
Well, I focus on the technical side because if I don't, then my viewers just won't grow. Also, I was very fortunate enough. I think about 2 years ago, I worked with a South African company that works directly with YouTube, and because of that, I was able to learn more about the algorithm, when's the best time to post, how to fix my thumbnails, engaging with my audience to make sure that they come back. So I think a lot of people don't think about that, but there's a lot of work that
Yeah.
goes into it, especially I do because I do everything. So I do all my research by myself, my editing, my filming, and that's a lot. A lot of time goes into it.
Yeah. How do you balance the YouTube channel with work?
Well, I do YouTube full time now, so all my
Oh, do
time is
you?
just here. But
Oh, okay.
yeah, I do.
Oh, fab. Okay, that's brilliant. Yeah, like I say, I mean, just getting going is so critical and so important. What are and this navigating the algorithm? Sure, it is like it's like trying to figure out crack a code, isn't it?
Yeah,
Sorry,
it is.
Gerard, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that you were actually a social worker. Did you work as a social worker for a period of time? Did that influence the kind of things that you're interested in? Because I mean, social work, psychology, you often find it's the same kind of people who have this sort of
Yeah.
curiosity about beings, compassion for human beings. So did you work a bit first, or did you kind of, because of COVID, go straight into doing this has become your career?
Well, when I started my YouTube channel, I was studying to be a social worker, and then after I graduated, I worked as a social worker for a few months. And I think it's so interesting because I think when you're younger, you just like choose a career path and you don't really think much of it. But after I started my YouTube channel, I feel like my what I want to do has completely changed, which is why I feel like I'm not really practicing because I like what I do and my true crime content. So now I'm trying to like further that. So yeah, so I think it's a bit challenging, but
Yeah.
Mm.
How I mean, when did you get to the point where you were like, okay, I can do this now, as this can be my full-time gig? I mean, how long did that take you to get to that point? And what was it like making that decision?
I think okay, because I wasn't really happy at my job with my job, so I decided to leave and resign. So it was just the next step, the most logical step to take, because I was already filming and everything, but I wasn't as consistent. So I just saw this as an opportunity to be more consistent I'm doing and just to increase the amount of videos that I post. And hopefully, with that, my channel will grow and will be better than it was. So I'm still figuring that out. I'm learning every week as it goes. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's doing well so far.
Yeah, I do think
Mm.
you have to be like a student of the algorithm. And I mean, I'm starting to kind of get used to some of the language around this stuff, but you know, because it's evolved. I mean, as I understand, you know, 10 years ago, it was more about just straight up how many views you're getting. You know, how
Yeah.
many people are coming to visit. But now there's a lot more sense, from what I understand. You know, it takes into account a lot more how long people are staying, how much engagement you're getting, are people commenting on your content, are they watching for for a lengthy duration. So the better engagement that you can get, then that seems to be the part of the secret sauce that's as it's evolving.
That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah. Talk
And
about
you've
the
been
sorry.
around for five. Sorry, boy, you've been around for 5 years. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
long time,
Yeah.
and to be consistent around. Because I think you interviewed me, was in 2021 with my first book, or early
Yeah, it
2022.
was.
I think that's you've been around. Yeah,
It's like a
fantastic. And I mean, I know some of the
circle
people
moment
comment.
now. Speak about you and rave about you. And then like you sent me your profile of Africa 2 book to do a giveaway. And I even inserted a video that you sent me for my subscribers. So now speaking to you is literally like a full circle moment. I was telling my mom, I was like, I hope I don't like fangirl because I'm so excited.
It's always great to help, and I think that's what we like about our channel is we try to support and promote other people. We don't have a view that we mustn't tell anybody about other people's shows because then they won't watch our show, and that's just such a narrow-minded. So people like you and Nicole Engelbrecht and other people to kind of celebrate what we have in South Africa, whether it's the people, where the techie hits the tar type of thing, or the people telling stories. Because it's really nice to be able to just promote and celebrate other people's successes also.
Yeah. On
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
what is your take on the different kind of on the range of crime that is out there? What crime content? What do you enjoy and what don't you enjoy? Do you have like where's your preference at? What are your thoughts on the landscape of content in the crime space?
Well, I think for me, I just really enjoy podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts and YouTubers. That's the main thing I watch. Sometimes I watch like a lot of Netflix documentaries because sometimes they can be like a bit controversial, like the Dharma Netflix show. So that's really just what I focus on, what I really enjoy. And I think I lean more towards like American YouTubers and podcasters. But even
Okay.
though, or like the new one, like South African true crime, love that.
Yeah, well, I mean, there hasn't been a huge amount of variety, from a
Yeah,
South
that's
African
true.
or an African point, and that's kind of growing now. So I think it does seem, it's nice that there is more variety out there for folks. What about how do you? I mean, I want to talk about two things. One is how has your content kind of fundamentally evolved over the years, and how do you find, where's your focus now? What are what are your priorities right now? I mean, I think those are good enough. I won't ask the third part. I will get there. But yeah, so yeah. Tell us how your content's evolved and where's your focus kind of now today from a content point of view.
Well, I think the content is really like it's just really similar. I think also what's very challenging with South African crime in particular is that when people research cases, you get the same information. So there's not a lot of information out there, and that's what you'll find that's very similar with a lot of other true crime YouTubers, especially in South Africa. And I know sometimes people will say like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I've heard this case before," and it's probably that they have because you'll find the same documentaries, the same books, and often people like kind of tell the stories the same, so that is a bit challenging. But I think as I'm growing, I'm just learning to find ways to relate it to cases that are currently happening. So I remember once there was a case that broke out about a serial killer, so I decided to go hunting for a South African serial killer because I thought, okay, if people are thinking about South African serial killers, this would be a great time for me to speak about that, and just finding things like that. Also, just connecting things that are happening. So we have like Pride Week. Then for that whole month, I'll speak about cases that affect the LGBTQ community,
Cool.
GBV cases, and just try and find things to relate in that time.
Okay.
Which
Awesome.
which cases have surprised you? I mean, we always do cases. We think this case is really going to be popular. Sometimes it's not. Have there been cases that you've done that you really were surprised by the response and the feedback and how popular it was? Because maybe for you it was like, well, it's interesting, but not the most.
I think the my most watched actually is Ananas Mate, and I hadn't even heard about him, and that case like blew up. I think I'm almost on 200K views, and I was so
Wow.
surprised that people were really interested in that. So that was just interesting. And I think like the one that's least watched is I found a case recently about a guy who was just like killing people, and he said Otokoloshi helped him, and I thought that would do really really well, but it didn't do well at all. So I think sometimes like that, like sometimes we'll think something will blow up and it doesn't blow up, and something that you kind of just like forget about, that will surprise you the most.
And I mean, Ananias Mate was the early 2000s, wasn't it? So it's not even a recent case. It's an old case. I remember that from my time. Interesting.
It's very interesting.
Guys, I just want to invite everyone that's joined us to watch along to please drop your questions into the chat. Of course, we always invite you to please subscribe to the channel and subscribe to Tshego's channel as well, please, tonight, guys. So make sure that if you haven't already, you're subscribed to both of us. It does help us to grow and be able to do this more sustainably. And also, like I say, drop your questions in the chat and I'll start looking at those now and we'll drop some of those into the conversation as well. I guess we started talking a little bit about what are some of the cases that have really stood out for you in your time that you've been doing this. Let's go into that. What are some of the more standout cases for you that you've covered, and why?
I think Jack Mohale, I did that recently. That's my most recent case. And I watched your guys' video on it, where you did like, I think it was like an hour and a half video. I watched the whole thing, and how you said how you expected, like, how most people didn't know that there was a serial killer in the West End. So I just wanted to pick your brain about that, like why you think most people didn't know about it, or why it wasn't as big of a case as it was. Because even when you try and find information about him, it's very limited.
It's interesting because you find like, so Jack, people, he was killing sort of near Lenasia, that part of Soweto, the N12, along the N12 highway. And I think it's because, some cases, from the moment it happens, it's in the media, and it's in the media while it's under investigation. It's in the media when we catch the guy. So they become prominent in the media attention. And also when it goes to trial, because people knew of the case from previously, it's got media attention at trial. But Jack was one of those cases where he wasn't at all in the media. And I don't think it was even in the news at the time that there was a serial, really, at the time, if I recall correctly. And this is probably, 2007-ish, I think, off the top of my head. So it wasn't like a case that was active in the media at the time of the investigation. And then he was kind of caught, and there wasn't much fanfare. And I think that's why it just didn't become a big case. So even when it went to trial, there was some media there. But it wasn't like, it was just media because, here's a serial killer on trial, not because we all were present during the investigation. It all captured our attention. When the cop's going to solve it. It's kind of like almost gets into the media after the fact. So for a lot of people, that's not as much. They didn't have that personal investment in, are the cops going to catch this guy? So I think that's probably why. It was one of these sort of cases that at the time of the investigation just wasn't in the collective consciousness of South Africa. So you're playing catch up in a way if you want to try and get into the media. And it was a fascinating case, like you say. I mean, Jack was just a real asshole, to put it very politely. He was an asshole he threatened to rape and kill the investigating officer, Khomotso. She was great during the trial. And he was much older than the average serial murderer, and he had a whole long history of, I think, you've done it more recently, so your facts are probably more accurate than mine. And he'd been swindling people out of properties. He committed rapes when he was much younger. But I think at the time of the murder, he was in his 40s, which is quite unusual for serials. And if I recall correctly, at the trial, I testified doing a linkage analysis, if I recall correctly, because a lot of the bodies, I think, were found in a relative state of decomposition. So we had the same geographical area, the victimology, how we killed them, etc. So that was my role. I think, I don't even know if I testified at sentencing. I think I definitely testified about the linkage. And Tshego, I don't know if you know whether I testified at sentencing for him also.
I'm not sure. I remember the judge mentioned that you had like a great profile against them. I remember that.
Yeah, I think the judge was very positive. I think he was overall positive about the work the cops had done, which is always nice because you don't often get that feedback. So it was definitely from a linkage point of view, one of those cases that we refer to as sort of a case law case, because there was a really, he'd referred to the Quarry case in the judgment, which was the previous trial when we used it successfully, the linkage evidence case, because the judge was quite glowing about the use of that behavioral linkage evidence in court. So that was pretty cool for that point of view, if anything.
Yeah.
It is quite interesting how our courts approach the linkage evidence, linkage analysis, and what have you. Just elaborate a bit on that, Gerard, for folks that haven't kind of caught any of our previous discussions. In other parts of the world, maybe is it not maybe taken as seriously, or that doesn't have as much credibility? But in South Africa, it's common sense wins the day.
Yeah. So basically, the linkage analysis is, whenever you have a serial, you don't always have forensic evidence linking case A and B, DNA or whatever. So during the investigation phase, you have to make a decision as what cases do we include as part of our investigation and which cases do we exclude. So it's used then during the investigation, but it's also can be used, and we have used it quite successfully at trial, where we prosecute the person on, say, like in the Quarry case, we had 16 murders, 8 we had some kind of physical evidence, whether it's cell phones recovered, DNA, or he did a confession or pointed out the scenes. But the other 8 cases we didn't have any of that, but we had very strong similarities. So then someone like me or Elmarie, who's still in the unit, would come and testify about, our opinion is that these are the work of the same individual. We can't say it's Jack or Jane, but it's the work of the same individual because of the similarities. And we've used that quite successfully in court. Now, why it isn't often used in America, for example, is because they have a jury system. And they feel that the jury might be unfairly swayed by the person giving the evidence. So if you have like an FBI profiler that comes with an automatic sort of level of status, and the jury might, as a bunch of lay people, might be inappropriately swayed to believe this person. Whereas in South Africa, because it's a judge or a magistrate, they're more used to analyzing and assessing evidence, whether it's credible or not. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's not as frequently used in jury countries, although it has been used to some degree.
Absolutely. I just want to drop in a little, just for folks who are just tuning into the show. You're of course joined us here, right, on Profiler Africa, and you are also joining us on Tshego Paledi's YouTube channel. So yeah, just welcome everybody. Please do drop your questions. I'm going to start putting some of those up in a second. I just wanted to drop in a clip, though, just for folks who aren't familiar with the great content that Tshego does. We were talking a little bit about a particular case now, and here's a little intro just to give you a taster.
Jack Madumeza Mokgale was born in April 1967, and he attended high school right up until grade 12, but apparently he didn't complete the grade. However, some sources do say that he left school in grade 10. His family described him as a really good man, and there's not much known about him. What we do know is that at the time of this case, he did have 2 children who were both under the age of 10. And after he left school, within about 3 years, Jack Mokgale started his criminal career.
Okay, so there you have it. That is, of course, from telling the told and untold. So please do get over there, guys, and subscribe. All the links are in the info box as well below, everyone, just so FYI. Gerard.
So where do you mentioned the research. So where do you typically do your research? What are your common sources that you're going to use to put your story together?
Yeah.
I try to look for court documents if those are available. Accredited sources like News 24, Times Live. If there are any documentaries where the family has spoken about the person, then I'll also use that. I don't use any like Facebook or Twitter. I try to find things that are accredited and then just compare those. Also, your guys' videos. I also watch some of your videos because I know that you worked on some cases, so it's nice to know what you say about that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. I mean, obviously, using as many different sources as possible is definitely the best way to go. Yeah, that's definitely right.
How do you actually pick the cases that you're going to do on a week-by-week basis?
Well, in my videos, I always have in my description box a link that people can suggest cases for me. Or like I mentioned, I just see what's happening around the country in that time and then find cases that relate to that. And sometimes just like a simple Google search, like, South African serial killers, or I'm just finding things something like that. Or if I really, really struggle, I go find documentaries that came out and then just like look at the names and then search based on that.
Okay. Okay. We've got some questions. Let's have a look here. From Molebocheng, knowing how SA is, do you guys get threats sometimes about stories you cover? Let's broaden that out. What kind of negativity do you get? It's the internet. There's always going to be the good and the bad. How do you deal with some of the bad edge of the internet?
Well, I think I'm actually very fortunate. I don't get any negative comments really. That probably makes like 1% of my videos. Most of my comments and how people react to me is very positive. I think off the top of my head, I just remember when I spoke about Ananias Maite once, and then someone from like his village sent me or like commented this long paragraph about how he was trying to support his kids and my facts were wrong. Or I remember once I spoke about a woman's husband who killed his parents along with his sister, and then the wife sent me an email and she said, "Ma'am, my husband's a good man. We should meet up for lunch so I can tell you more about him." But besides that, I don't really get anything negative.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I pretty much found the same as well. I would say that sometimes people may be bordering on the eccentric. Do we put it that way? Yeah, sometimes some eccentric folks. This is an interesting one from Julia. How do you cope with the murder cases emotionally? I mean, have you been coming into, because I mean, inevitably you come into contact with some pretty gruesome stuff, whether, crime scene photographs, et cetera, et cetera. How do you manage that? Because it can all get a bit dark and negative if you stay in it for too long, can't it?
That's true. I think sometimes I do take a lot of breaks from my channel and just researching cases, especially if sometimes like you speak about like children or sometimes maybe even speaking about someone that's like my age and that can get a bit heavy. So I think just taking a break and stepping away from crime is always a good way to just like center yourself.
Yeah,
Balance.
absolutely. Kind of an extension of that. What has been the heaviest or most difficult case to cover and why? I know you usually share content disclaimers for these cases, but some of them have been incredibly difficult to listen to. And I know, I mean, I've got one or two that really, you know, when you get talking about, you can feel you kind of stuff. It kind of hits a nerve emotionally. You know, what are those cases for you?
Recently I did sexual abuse and grooming in South African all boys schools,
Mm.
and one of the young boys took his own life, and I think that was hard for me because I have someone who I see as a younger brother who was the same age as him. So when you hear about something like that happening in a school where you think that children are protected, also I think because I studied social work and my passion is children, speaking about children is very difficult for me, and I often find myself like struggling to like record. I have to take breaks in between because in as much as we talk about cases and people forget that these are real people and these people have lives and have people that love them, it's I think it's just a bit challenging.
Yeah. I want to jump into some of the, you know, a little bit of a discussion about some of the ethics of what we do here. You know, the kinds of kind of content that we do. But before we do that, having mentioned the schoolboy story from Jojo, I watched Tshego's channel today on the sexual abuse on schoolboys. Why was the teacher from Parktown Boys not named? Why is his victim named but not the predator? Gerard, any thoughts on that? Is there any reason?
Yeah, normally if it's a child, I guess under 18, the law defines someone as a child. You shouldn't be mentioning the name of the victim or suspect if he's under 18. Normally the offender, if it is they've been charged in court, they've arrested and appeared in court, then you can usually mention their name as an alleged suspect, obviously not as a convicted person. But if it's a incest kind of case, or when a father abused their own child, often they'll also say you can't mention dad's name because by implication you identify who the child is. So that's the general rules as far as I know. That one has to be just obviously cautious about those, and it's sometimes difficult because when you're doing, sometimes it's quite easy for something to slip out. So one has to be very conscious about not revealing. But for arrested people, it would usually be, like I said, once they've appeared in court after arrest, then it's essentially a public knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Another question. I mean, we're just getting lots of nice questions coming in, so we're just going to go with this for a little while. From Nelisiwe, Tshego, in any of the cases you have covered, have you never wanted or wished you could interview the perpetrators as part of your research, and if so, who? Yeah, who would you like to be in a room with and pick their brain?
Actually, I don't want to be in a room with any of them because they actually scare me, and I don't think I'll be able to ask the right questions. So I'm okay with just watching people do that.
With the reporter, okay. Gerard,
I'd be
interested to ask that question to you as well.
Oh,
if you could pick somebody that you've not spoken to, that you would like to speak to.
Oh, okay.
Good question.
Sure, that's a good question. I've never interviewed Moses Atole. I wouldn't interview him, to be honest with you. Just because he's like so far, I think, the biggest body count, if you want to put it that way. Yeah, off the top of my head, that's one. I'm sure there are others, but that's definitely one off the top of my head that I'd want to speak to, Moses Atole.
Okay, then. Yeah. Okay, there you go. Then you were going to ask a question. Go for it, Gerard.
Oh, yeah, but I kind of linked to that. Which case that you haven't done is the one that you really, really would like to do, and why haven't you done it?
I want to do Senzo Mewe, but my mom is very iffy about that because she says like people disappear and people die, and then she's just like, you're not touching that case. I would love to do that.
Yeah. And of the current cases that are out there that are still perhaps not yet ready to be put into a show, are there any that you think I really want to cover this one in my channel when it's finalized?
I think Jocelyn's disappearance, I think that would be a very interesting case. Me and my mom also have an agreement that I don't cover recent cases. So I try to cover cases that have happened at least like 2 years before. So since 2025 now, the latest would probably be like 2023. That's the closest I can go when covering cases. So I try to stick to that, but also trying to be respectful towards the people that I speak about, because it's still something that's probably very heavy on their hearts and something that they're still coming to terms with. So I also try and be respectful about that.
Yeah.
It sounds like the social worker in you.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I wanted to touch on is, the ethics of this, because, of crime content in general, because the way I see it, there's definitely sensational content out of there, which is kind of sensational for the sake, made to be sensational for the sake of being sensational, and kind of really playing on that kind of clickbait kind of aspect of content creation. And a little bit low, kind of targeting the lowest common denominator, if you like. But then at the same time, there's a lot of value in talking about the types of crimes that are going on from a perspective of, they're interesting stories, and I think we have a natural we're kind of drawn to this kind of human drama. But, in the South African terms in particular, where crime and violence is such a problem, it's a good way to communicate some of the challenges we have in the country through an interesting story. Thoughts? Tshego, where do you stand on the ethics of what it is that we do? Where do you draw the lines for yourself? Where do you feel, do you get to that point where you're like, oh, I'm maybe going a little bit sensational here, and where do you pull yourself back? Where's that line for you?
I think for me, if I find a documentary and I found that the family has spoken about it, then I feel more comfortable speaking about cases. And I also try not to cover cases that I feel like sometimes people just cover cases just to cover cases and just to get the numbers, and they don't necessarily think about the impact that it will have on their families and their friends. So I think it's always important to just be respectful when you're covering cases, and not to just cover cases just because you want to cover it and just want to have your name out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, sorry guys, let me just get...
And I think it also comes back to like making sure you do good research, that you don't just, listen to someone else's channel and make your story based on that you try to cross-reference it with other sources of information. I mean, the fact that you go to court records, that's absolutely amazing, because that's kind of, if you get the judgment, that's really the summary of what was presented in the courtroom, what the court heard, what was tested under cross-examination, what the judge has given their views on that evidence, which is credible, which is not. And then you're really, really obviously safe as houses, because, what gets reported in the media is often not accurate sometimes, and things that people say, interpret. So the court stuff is for me amazing. And like you say, if there's people that have been interviewed, then again, it's out of that person's mouth. So that the cross-referencing, I think, is very important. And like you say, not to try and make the story sensationalistic because you want people, hanging off every word and clicking the like and subscribe, because you say things that make them sort of like their eyes sort of open up wide, etc.
Yeah. Do you find that it can be quite rewarding what you do, especially when you start to kind of get some of the feedback from your viewers where, they're enjoying what you're doing, they're learning stuff from what it is that you're doing? Where are the rewards for you?
I remember someone once commented that they started watching my channel when I first started in 2020, and then she said that she went on to study law. Sometimes I've had family members or friends comment and say thank you so much for sharing the story and for like telling people what happened. So that's very rewarding when people appreciate what you're doing and just have positive things to say about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone's just a super proud mommy as well. Tabo is just a super proud mommy, I got to tell you. Is that your mom?
It's my boyfriend's mom, actually.
Don't worry, okay? You don't have to worry. Sorry, is that your mom? Sorry, I
It's my
missed that.
boyfriend's mom.
Oh, your boyfriend's mom. Oh, okay. My mother also says hello. There she is saying hello. Good evening, all. So I get that. A regular viewer. Okay, let's have a look here. From Tiffany, I've been threatening to start a YouTube channel for years, and seeing how SA crime content creators are growing, I should stop putting it off. I'm inspired again. Great. We're glad, Tiffany. Get it going. And when it's up and running, you get in touch, because, like I say, we're all part of the crime creation family here. Let's see, what else have we got? This industry can grow. Where do you see yourself? Oh, here's a good one. This industry where you can grow. Where do you see yourself in the future? What are your goals? What are your aspirations? Where do you see yourself a few years from now? What does the Tshego empire look like ultimately?
Well, I would love to have my own true crime show. I think that's like my ultimate goal.
What, in what sense? On a TV show?
Yeah, like Showmax,
I
High,
see.
Netflix,
Okay.
telling the tales and Untold. I have Gerard there. I invite him, like he's always on all those other shows. Then he'll be on my show too.
Well, let's get the concept together, man, and let's get it over there. I'm sure they would. I'm sure they'd. We got the followers, we got the expertise, we got the experience here. Let's just bang it together and get it over there. Let's see who else we've got. Go Tshego, so proud of you. So happy to hear someone interested in the Senzo Mayiwa case. Here's one. What were your thoughts on what are your thoughts on this Jocelyn Smith case? Which has been in the news a lot lately.
Say again?
Tshego, sorry.
Answer that.
Oh, should we move on to the next one? Okay. Would one be able to interview someone in prison on camera? Here's a question from somebody. Would one be able to interview someone in prison on camera like they do in America? If not, why not? Now, we've gone down this road a little. Maybe, Gerard, you would like to jump in on this one.
So it has happened. There have definitely been South African shows where they've interviewed people currently serving in prison. It's there's no law against it. It's kind of really, honestly, up to correctional services attitude at that point in time when you happen to be asking. So some people have been successful and they've interviewed in prison. Some people haven't, and they haven't. I think it's less often that I'm hearing nowadays that correctional services is allowing people to do interviews with prisoners. It's obviously still ultimately the prisoner's choice. So even if correctional services, yes, in principle, we don't mind you guys coming to do it, it has to be the consent of that particular person to participate. So I don't know whether correctional services tends just to say no because they're scared of any camera in our prison, because our prisons are not nice. They're not functioning great. And as you've heard, we had people faking people's deaths and escaping prison and corruption. So I do think they're always going to be overly anxious about what could you expose about their prison that isn't working functionally. And I'd probably say that's probably the biggest reason why they're reluctant to let journalists in to interview people in the prison context. But technically, it is actually possible. I think it would be great if they allowed that more often, but yeah, that's just us.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the only time I've really seen somebody in an SA prison in a meaningful way was that British guy that did the documentary down there in Polesmore. The soap actor / investigative journalist. And he had incredible access. Is there an issue, Gerard, that the disconnect between, the investigators and the police around the case and then correctional services as well? Because I remember back in the day when I was a young guy trying to do a crime documentary in my early 20s, that we kind of made good traction with getting the police's the investigators buy-in. It was actually Mickey Pistorius via somebody that we reached out to at the time. And then that kind of was more, it seemed like that was a more doable step than correctional services. When we kind of got to the correctional services conversation, it was just kind of door closed and, we couldn't get past that step.
I think it's the nature of the work, because with the police, it's easier to meet an investigator. It's easier to get their phone number. It's easier to find out where their offices are and say, hey, can we have a chat? Whereas correctional services, it's all behind the prison, or it's all at the head office building. Where do we even start to have that conversation with someone? So I think it's because the police are just more accessible due to the nature of their work, that you could get that opportunity to approach the detective at court, when the guys appearing in court, you can, hey, detective so-and-so. And so you have the access to just get the conversation going, where in correctional services, you don't.
Okay, fair enough. For those of us, for anyone that might have just jumped onto the live stream but has been joining us on the show, you are, of course, we're doing something really fun tonight. We're simulcasting both on Profiler Africa and on Tshego Paledi's channel, Telling the Told and Untold, which you can check out right here at Tshego Paledi. So if you just hit that into your YouTube search bar, you will pop up. Also, all the information with all the various links, etc., are down in the info box. If you just expand that, do hit subscribe, do hit like if you're enjoying the conversation, and hit that bell if you want to get notifications for when any of us post new content. All right, what I wanted to do is, there's a lovely question here from Lele. Let me just take that off, and then let's put this question up. Hi, Gerard. Are there any cases you have been involved in previously or worked on that was super difficult and heavy for you? And is there advice or guidance you could share for Tshego and her videos?
Oh, so the first case that was difficult. I think one that was really just frustrating would have been that, and I've spoken about it before, the murder of Andrea Venter. Just because before the death, she was let down by the criminal justice system. After her death, the guy gets bail, escapes the country. We catch him in Brazil. He gets arrested. He gets released after a period of time incorrectly. We have to catch him again and we bring him back. And he's never really just accepted that it's his fault that he killed her. He still seems to blame her. So that was a very difficult one, because it just carried on and on and on. And then, there's this huge bugger up, and there's that huge bugger up. So that was just so frustrating for us on the investigation side, and of course the victim's family, to have to go and tell them, listen, the Brazilians have incorrectly released him and he's gone again, and it just, so that was definitely, I think, the one that was the most of an emotional roller coaster. But I think in general, just trying to keep a clinical approach to the cases, to not let yourself get emotionally involved, and keep the bigger goal in mind of why you're there. So for us as police, it was to catch the person getting convicted. So that's the bigger goal. For Tshego, would be to put together a story that tells as accurately as possible what happened for people to understand. If you don't do that, then it's very easy to get stuck in the little details and emotionally very caught up and wrapped up in it. But if you keep the bigger picture in mind of what you're actually trying to do, I think that does help. I found that to help, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's have a look what else we've got here. Anyone have any thoughts on the Carr and Reed case? It's not something I brought up before.
I don't know that case, to be honest with you. Sorry, I tend not to watch news.
Okay, we'll bank that one then, and we'll put that in the to-do list. We have a growing to-do list of cases and things to talk about, so I'm sure you can relate. From Tiffany again, do you find that you're less emotionally affected by cases in other parts of the world? I find SA cases hit me harder emotionally, and I tend to not go down the rabbit hole as easily into those ones. Eh?
I agree. I think because when people think about true crime and serial killers and murderers, you always think about your Dahmers, your Ted Bundys. You never really think that it could happen in South Africa. Because when you think about South Africa, it's like so close to you. It's basically like in your backyard. So when you hear about that, you kind of become really scared, because in as much as it happens in other countries, it also happens in our country. And I think that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to start my channel, because there's this fascination with all these killers, but people never really know what's happening in their own country.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's just much easier to relate, because I mean, you know the areas. They talk about, like, this one in Centurion with the 3 cops that were found dead. I mean, I know that area. I used to live in Pretoria. So suddenly you have the personal connection, not emotional connection per se, but I know that area. It's something like I've driven past that area before. And, the people's accents, the accents. And so I think when it's local, there's often just a basic knowledge of the area, but sometimes, as it happens in South Africa, we're not a huge country, you might know somebody who knows somebody who's related to that case in some form or fashion, or you know the detective who are working on the case. So it just definitely makes it more in your space, as opposed to, like, if you're talking about a case in Russia, okay, what is it? I have an emotional association with the case.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I really enjoy is the different nuances of South African crimes, the different cultural context, and how that influences what people's behavior is, so just the nature of how it's different here, and it kind of so you get a different take on it. You kind of understand the context of crime as it exists in America because you've seen so many crime stories out from that part of the world. But not only when you're watching local, South African content, are you getting interesting new stories, you're getting an insight into the nature of the culture and the society, which is an interesting perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do you feel about I often say that these days one of the scariest things to be in the world is a woman in South Africa, unfortunately. If you look at the levels of GBV and violence, and of course our murder rate, and then you put that together with the challenges of the criminal justice system, at the police, the very low solving rate, it's quite a responsibility as a woman in South Africa to be communicating and almost kind of like shining a light on this stuff for women, so that women can, really kind of just really come to terms with the how deep the challenges are for women in South Africa in particular.
Yeah.
And just keep it present in people's minds.
Yeah, I find that something I really hope that through our stories, because ultimately, typically the victim in the vast majority of the cases that we're covering is a woman, isn't it? So you kind of get the feeling, I always get that sense that part of what we're doing here is kind of empowering people to have more knowledge around what the issues are that women confront in the country, and they are kind of crazy, man. It's pandemic numbers. That's kind of the reality. It's like a pandemic of crime, which is scary.
Yeah, that's true.
From Sarah, found your channel last weekend and loving your content, but even more the accents and expressions. Been living in Luxembourg for 12 years, and hearing Bucky and Lani are a breath of fresh air. Well, sweet, my butt. We smaak je stukkend, and it's lekker to have you here. Super proud of you, Tshego. Gerard, let's see what's off the SAN crime topic. What do you think of the Diddy case? Ooh, this is a good one. We've not asked you this. What do you guys think of the Diddy case?
Look, I mean, I've just seen bits and pieces on, CNN when I kind of watch that. I watch most of my news on YouTube, to be honest with you. CNN shorts and MSNBC and whatever else pops up in my feed. Look, I mean, I'm not surprised that anybody can do anything. The fact that you're really rich and famous and can have any woman you want doesn't mean you're not going to have unusual interests and stuff that might be criminal in its nature. So definitely interesting to see how it's going to play out. I don't think that they would have lightly gone to trial. You should never take anybody onto trial lightly. But I think when you do have a guy who's a multi-millionaire, who's going to have the top lawyers representing him, you're even more cautious before you decide to go ahead on trial. And I know that we're doing jury selection now this week, and that's usually like literally just before they're going to start the trial. So it'll be interesting to see what's going to come out there and what famous people are going to be dragged into this because of what's going to come out. But yeah, I mean, if we've got bishops, how many bishops do we have in South Africa that are on trial for doing horrible things to people? And your fame and your fortune doesn't mean you're a good person. That's absolutely for true.
Tshego, what are your thoughts on the Diddy case?
Well, I listened to a deep dive podcast on the case, and there's a lot of things against Diddy, and I think where there's smoke, there's fire. And I remember they said that they gave people who had been, I think, abused, 20 years ago, they gave them until a certain date in November of last year or the year before, and that's when so many people came out and so many people have similar stories about him and his son as well. And I don't think so many people that don't know each other can have so much to say or have the same things to say about one person and about their interests and what they did to them. So I hope it goes well and justice is served because he did it.
Yeah, look, the one thing that I find interesting with these cases is, as a media guy, is these are extremely high profile cases. And going back to the OJ trial, which I remember where I was, when OJ was found not guilty, it's like, it's up there, Diana, OJ, 9/11, those big things where you remember where you were. What I find interesting is how the media kind of plays its role in these really big profile cases, and how the media involvement can have such an influence that it can, make the glove not fit,
Yes.
and can really swing something in a totally unpredictable direction. And especially now as well, in the kind of evolving landscape, it's interesting to see how it would be interesting, for example, the Oscar case, something similar to happen again now, and to see how the media would react kind of a decade later to a case like that. I would imagine there would be an absolute flood, a flood of content compared to, we had a whole channel for the Oscar case, but I would imagine it would just be completely a different beast altogether.
This is going to be a spectacle, that's for sure. There's no way about it. Just because of P. Diddy and whoever else is going to be dragged into the courtroom, it's going to be a spectacle.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's have a look what else we've got here on the chat, guys. Thank you, guys. From Tshego Paledi, thank you guys for giving my little girl this opportunity. Appreciate it. I got to tell you that we're the ones getting the opportunity here with our 12,000 subscribers. Who we love you. We love our 12,000 subscribers, and we love we're growing. But we're the one with the opportunity to talk to. Tsego's the one with the great audience here. So it's really we're so happy to be able to talk to all of your guys out there, which is interesting because, that's another thing is. One thing about South Africa is we are different kind of communities of people. And I do think the algorithm kind of categorizes you a little bit and kind of pushes you towards certain audiences. How do you feel, what are your thoughts on kind of targeting a broad audience, Tshego? What are some of the strategies to broaden an audience as much as possible as a creator?
I think just using a lot of hashtags. I know hashtags sound so small, but then you do your hashtags and your hashtags should be very specific. So even if you're just serial killer, there's a million people that use that one hashtag. But if you say South African serial killer, it will make it will make people find you more if that's what they're targeting. But I don't really know. I think I'm also still learning, even though I've been doing this for a while.
What would you, if you were to sum up what your strategy has been if in retrospect, granted that we've been talking about, it's been a kind of evolving strategy. If you look back now, what is it that's gotten you, what have been the most important things to get you to a really solid base of subscribers? Again, just the ultimate tips for guys that are wanting to start something up.
Consistency. So if you're not consistent, your subscribers are not going to stick around and watch you grow. And interacting with people. I remember when I started my channel, I was still very new, a couple of months in. And then someone tweeted that South African YouTubers always do the same thing. And then as a joke, I replied and I said, oh, there's this South African true crime YouTuber. She covers murderers. And it was a joke. And then I said, oh my gosh, it's me. Please subscribe. And I think within 2 days, I got 10,000 subscribers. Wow. And then from there, I just kept growing. So I think I was very lucky in that sense, but also in that I saw that as an opportunity to advertise myself because people were saying things about South African YouTubers. So I was like, you know what? I'm a South African YouTuber, so they should know about me.
Absolutely.
There you go. Well done.
Awesome.
As you know, Siwa's got quite a cool question also at the bottom there.
So where, sorry, who, Gerard?
Nelisiwe and Norwood.
Nelisiwe, okay. Is there any case you've come across in your research and decided to drop and not go through with it? If so, what was the reason? Good one, yeah. Let's see where. Thank you.
I think starting a case and then not having enough research. Like you'll find a name, you're like, oh, this sounds like such a great case to cover, and then people will just have like something basic. They'll just tell you like a short story about what happened, and then when you try and do a deep dive, find court documents, news articles, documentaries, you can't find anything, and like it's really really frustrating. So then you just can't continue because I'm not gonna have a 2-minute video when my videos are usually like 30 to 40 minutes long.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
So you never had one where you felt, I've got the information, but this one I'm too nervous about doing this case?
Well, I had one. It was recent. I did the Springs House of Horrors, where the father was abusive towards like his children and his wife. And I think I sat on it since 2021. Like I kept trying to cover it, and then it was just too heavy on my heart. And then I just left it. And I only covered it recently. I think I only covered it this year. But I had it for like 4 years, just waiting for me to like get over the fear and the hurt that I felt when I'd go through it.
That was a hard case, yeah. It was not. It was just so disgusting. Really.
Yeah,
I remember going to the house where they stayed, and there were literally rats running around inside the house. When we went into the kitchen, there was like a chutney bottle, so not like this, but a bottle. And you know the chutney bottles have those. Mrs. Ball's chutney bottles have those big openings. And a rat had like gotten stuck with its head inside and was hanging out, and it died, and it was just sitting on the kitchen table. And literally while I was interviewing the mom, like rats just running around, it was just like, conditions under which the kids were living, firstly. And I mean, a lot of people, unfortunately, in South Africa living in horrible conditions. And of course, what else happened in that house, which was just like, man, that was just like a double blow. Parents are supposed to be looking after you, don't look after you and give you that love you need as a kid. That was just heartbreaking. Yeah.
Has there ever been any desire in you, Tshego, to be a cop? How do you think you would fare as an investigator?
No, not for me. I wanted to study criminology at some point, and then I thought about it, really thought about it, and I thought, I don't know, I think I'm still young. I'm still trying to figure out what I really want to do with my life, whether it's like being a social worker or a journalist or a criminologist. My mind is constantly running and changing because I feel like I have like all these ideas and so much I want to do, and I just don't know where to start.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
A long.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Dioretus, I see another series, guys. Gerard interviewing some of the worst and analyzing after would be so insightful. Keep up the good work. Well, yeah, we've actually filmed a series called Profiler, which is just Gerard and his kind of colleagues, the psychologists of the world, just really deep diving, 24 minutes on the psychology of different cases. And that's something which we'll probably be dropping later in the year. While we're talking about that, I did just want to say, just be a little bit self-indulgent here, that last week we posted the first episode of South African Serial, a 12-part series that we produced that we're going to be flighting on the channel. And we flighted the episode on Stuart Vilken to kick it off. And for us, it's been our best video so far, over 83,000 views. So I just want to thank everyone for tuning in and watching, and thanks for all your great comments. We really appreciate it. It's really rewarding, you know, when you start seeing those numbers go up. Tshego, hey?
Yeah.
Hey, do you sometimes find yourself watching the numbers tick? So you're sitting with your laptop open and regularly refreshing to see if your numbers are ticking up when you get a real buzz on a video. I find myself doing that.
I used to do that before, but I think now I do that more with TikTok, because TikTok, I feel like it's easier to gain a lot of traction on TikTok. So sometimes I find myself going there and seeing my numbers growing.
Now, you mentioned that when we were discussing before we came on the show, that TikTok is something that you're really looking to kind of expand what you do on that. Tell us, and for everyone watching on both our channels, what are your plans there, and what can they expect from you in that space, and what is it about that space you enjoy?
I think what I really love about TikTok is that it's easier for you to get numbers and viewers as opposed to YouTube. So in my 5 years on YouTube and my 45,000 subscribers, I think I have over 3 million views. And on TikTok, I posted a video that I just didn't even think was going to blow up. And then it had like over 1 million views. So that was
Wow.
insane, like when you compare the
Sure.
numbers. And yeah, but I also I don't want to be a TikToker that just posts random videos just to post and get the numbers. So I try and take like short snippets from my long videos and
Okay.
then direct people to my channel.
Yeah. Yeah, because everything's going to go to feed everything else, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I've realized in SA it's difficult to get details on cases that occur, especially with serial. Want to ask how difficult was it to find sites that had accurate details? I know this has come up. I wanted to just add to this, and I wanted to say that if you're having that issue, you just have to find yourself a Gerard Labuskaghni. Okay? That's the secret. That's what I did. I was like, okay, if I want to start doing crime content and we need all the information and we need the smarts, because I ain't got them, what do I do? And I was directed. A guy by the name of Bryn Hodgkiss, who I reached out to, who is also an author in the crime space and a criminologist, etc. Did reach out to him, and he will be coming on the show at some point in the future. And he was the one that said, you know what? If you want to do anything related to crime in South Africa, Gerard Labuskaghni is the guy to speak to. And that's what I did.
Yes.
And here we are today. Now I've got a garage that's I've got to keep locked so that my because there's some interesting pictures and files in there. All right, let's have a look. True crime in our. We'll take a few more questions, guys, because I mean, I'm kind of enjoying the kind of loose nature of the chat at the moment, and it's nice to take some questions. We'll wrap it up fairly shortly. True crime in RSA does feel more personal. That's me following the Senzo case. I'm being a mother myself. I feel for his mom. Case dragging for 10 years. Okay, let's see if we can find some questions here. Female serial. Are there any female serial killer cases that Gerard or Tshego have investigated or researched? You guys are doing great work. Local is lekker. What are some of the interesting female killer cases that we can point people at, guys?
I recently covered South Africa's youngest female killer. I think she was young. I think maybe she was 14 years old, and she just found two random men in the street, and she asked them to kill her grandmother. And then then they killed her grandmother, and then she was arrested. But she was so young. I think she didn't even go to prison, if I'm not mistaken. And now she's out with a life and a child and a husband. So I think that was quite interesting because she was so young. So everyone just didn't understand how she managed to just go like see these two men and just like beg them to kill her grandmother, and they just did it because she asked them to.
Gerard?
Yeah, look, I mean, in my time, I'm trying to think if I worked on any female serials. I can't think offhand that I did. But I mean, obviously, someone like Rosemary Ndlovu, very fascinating case. We have another lady on trial now for doing something similar to what Rosemary Ndlovu did. We had, obviously, people talk about Daisy Melker, who is believed to have killed quite a few people, but only was convicted on one murder, her son. Ted Buerter wrote a very good book about that case, and that's worth reading. So yeah, it's always interesting because we just don't think, women to be violent, and let alone serially violent. So it's those are quite fascinating. But thankfully not a lot of them.
Just remembered a recent case I did on TikTok. It was like a very short video, and it was a lady who killed her one boyfriend with her one boyfriend. Like, okay, she had two boyfriends, and then she killed the one boyfriend because she believed that he infected her with HIV, and then she told her boyfriend, and then they killed him together. And then after a couple of years, that boyfriend was threatening her, so then she killed him and then made the son bury him in the same graveyard. And then after that, the son was threatening to tell the police. So then she killed her one son as well. So I think that was very interesting. And I don't think it's that known because even the information is very limited. But that was interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Serial, there you go.
Yeah.
Other creators that you how has it been? Have you been connecting with other local crime creators? Tell us a little bit about the community. I mean, we're starting to, we know a few guys, and we're kind of starting to branch out more and more and get to know everyone. But anyone that you've connected with, any other channels that you can recommend for people?
Well, I haven't really connected with people, but I know there's Bella Monsoon. I love her channel. She's pretty big on TikTok as well. I think that's about it. And obviously, like True Crime South Africa with Nicole Engelbrecht.
Yeah. No,
There's a lot of
absolutely.
good biggest.
Yeah. I mean, since our new iteration, we haven't had Nicole on since we did the previous version of the podcast, so we must invite her, Gerard. And same with Bella Monsoon. I mean, maybe sometime in the future there's an opportunity for us to do a whole panel discussion. We get all of us on one chat, and we do a stream together and to do something collaborative. I think that would be cool. Let's put that on the to-do list as well. All right, guys. I mean, we've spoken about a lot in the last hour and 11 minutes. Any questions? Any questions for Gerard, Tshego? Anything that you?
I have a few. I wrote them down. I want to see.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go.
Firstly, so obviously I mentioned that when I first heard about you, I got your book, Profiler Africa, and then you wrote the second one. So for people that don't know, Gerard is a profiler and he's profiled a lot of cases. He released 2 books called Profiler Africa, where he just discusses the case and how he found the serial killers. So I wanted to know if you're going to release a 3rd book.
Oh, there's definitely enough cases to talk about for a 3rd book, but at this point, there's no 3rd book on the table. So I can't say it won't ever happen, but there's not one actively in the process. Yeah.
You should think about it.
What about like less and not an anthology? Focus on a single case. That's what we want to see, Gerard. Do like a deep dive into a single case. That's the one, Gerard.
The problem is that if you have a book that's got 8 chapters and each chapter is a different case, then if people don't like 1 or 2 of the stories, but they like the other 6 or 7, they're going to like the book. But if you've got one case and they don't like it, then the whole book's terrible. So that's what makes me anxious about put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, if you talk about one particular case. I don't know. That's
well, in a year or 2, we'll know which cases kind of hit the biggest nerve and get the most views. Okay, so we'll help you. We'll help you make that decision. We'll make it a bit of a we'll give ourselves a bit of time, but whatever gets us over the 1 million views mark, okay, on a video, maybe we go with that one. Hey, Gerard. Yeah, carry on, Tshego. More questions for Gerard. Let's go.
I want to ask about the parole system in South Africa, because I've gotten a lot of questions about that, where people will be sentenced for like life imprisonment plus 144 years, and then after 25 years they receive parole, and people always wonder like why is that the case? Like, for example, like Jack Mogale should be released, I think soon, like 2034 if I'm not mistaken, and the judge put a note to say that he should not come out and he should probably die in prison, but chances are that he will be released. So why is that the case?
So the easiest way to understand parole in South Africa is whether it's a life sentence or not. So if it's not a life sentence, and you get, say, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, then you will start to have parole hearings halfway through. So if you get a 10-year sentence at 5 years, you start to have parole hearings. If you don't get parole, you'll have one maybe a year later, and another year later. So you still, even if you do get parole halfway through, you're still technically serving your sentence, but you're serving it outside in the community with restrictions. If you bugger up those restrictions, you get pulled back into prison, and you'll continue to serve the remainder of your full 10 years in prison. So basically, if it's not a life sentence, halfway through, you're not definitely going to get parole, but you start to have parole hearings. For life sentenced people, your what they call the minimum detention period is 25 years. Now, that doesn't mean at 25 years you walk out, that your sentence is expiring in 25 years' time. Your sentence is over your head till the day you die. But at 25 years on a life sentence, you'll start to have your own parole hearings, and probably every year or 2 afterwards, you'll have the next one and your next one and your next one. So again, if you do get it the first or second, third time that you have a parole hearing, you get conditions, and you're out in the community serving the remainder of that life sentence. If you ever mess up, They pull you right back inside, and you continue serving your sentence, but inside. So when you get life plus 150 years, those 150 years mean absolutely nothing. It's the life sentence which is going to determine when you're going to have your parole hearings. That's the shortest version.
I have a little add-on to that. Something I've never thought to ask is there somewhere you can go to see where different cases are at in the parole process? Like what cases are coming up for a parole hearing, for example? Is there any database that can be accessed? Or
no, you kind of basically have to calculate it from when the person was sentenced and what the sentence was. That's how you can figure out this person should be having parole hearings 5 years from now or 25 years from now if it's a life sentence. But there's no place you can go and say, this guy, when is he up for parole? I want to speak at the parole hearing and I want to contribute something. No, there should be, but there is not.
And how do you know how the scheduling is handled? Do you know because I'm sure there's a long list. Who makes that list?
Yeah, I guess correctional services would have it on record when you're supposed to start having your hearing. And in that lead up to that, you would have to have certain assessments done by, say, social workers or psychologists, or reports from the people that you work with in the prison if you've got a little job, etc. And all of that would be prepared for that parole hearing.
Yeah, it seems like good information to be in the public space would be, a database where you could go and see what cases are coming up, et cetera, so that if it's a case that you were personally involved in, maybe a family member, and it's now 25 years later, somewhere where you can go just to check in. Okay, when is the parole hearing scheduled for, kind of thing?
They're supposed to, for example, approach family members. They can come and be present at the parole hearing or say something. But often, 25 years down the line, 25 years ago, like how many people had email addresses, cell phones? If you were living in a formal settlement and it was your family member that's murdered, how are they going to track you down? They're not. So there should be, in my opinion, a system where you can log in, you register on the Correctional Services database as a civilian, and this is the guy's name, ID number, and you can actually put on that system, this is my current phone number, I want to be notified, I am a family member, I would like to participate in the hearing. But there is no such system. So often these things, the families aren't even aware that the person's coming up for parole or that there's been a parole hearing.
Yeah. Somebody did ask the question, anyone that was referred to an institution for life rather than prison, Gerard? I want to just broaden that question out as well, seeing as we're just talking about the parole system and just what sentencing looks like in South Africa. What are some of the exceptions when, mental health starts to come into the picture?
Yeah. The only place you can serve a sentence, in other words, the court has given you X amount of years, whether it's 5 years or a life sentence, the only place you can serve that is in a prison. The only way you can get into a place like Westkop or Sterkfontein, which are psychiatric hospitals, is if in the procedures of the trial, they found that you weren't criminally responsible because the voices told you to stab someone. Then the trial stops, you don't get found guilty. You're then sent to Sterkfontein or Westkop or Valkenburg in Cape Town. And you're not sent there as a punishment, because remember, we can't punish you if we can't hold you accountable for your actions. You're sent to a place like Westkop or Sterkfontein or Valkenburg for treatment. So although we know you might have killed 1 or 2 people because the voices in your head told you to do so, you've been for assessment, that's what the court has found, you will then be in Sterkfontein or Westkop until you're healed. Now that could be in a year's time, and then you can be released back into society. Or if you never come right, you can be there for 15 years, 20 years. You can be there your whole life because you're going there for treatment, not as a form of punishment.
Okay.
But if you, for example, are sentenced to like 10 years or life, while in prison you become mentally ill, you will be treated in prison for your mental illness. There's nowhere they can transfer you out of the prison system to Sterkfontein to treat your mental illness that is now developed.
Okay, great. Well, I think that was a very good. I think that's a cut and paste, like 5 minutes on the parole system, guys. We'll make that into a short. So there you go. You're basically like a little lecture on it. Tshego, more. Have you got a couple more questions for Gerard?
Yeah, I do. I have one. I wanted to ask, what makes the criminal landscape in South Africa unique compared to other countries? I know that you've once mentioned about like South African serial killers. What makes them a bit different from?
Oh, do you know what just happened,
Did you lose him?
We just lost Gerard for a second, but he'll come back on. It's live. It's live, so we got to roll with the punches. Let's see if he's back. There he is.
Yes.
Hello,
I
Gerard.
don't know what happened.
Gerard's. We didn't mention that you're not. We didn't mention that you're in a different hemisphere.
Yeah.
So that is worth pointing out. So it's been great that the connection hasn't cut out prior to that. Where were we?
Yeah.
Question.
Sorry,
Talking about the
yes.
criminal landscape, what makes it unique, right? So I know you mentioned once about South African serial killers, is that often South African serial killers will try different methods of killing their victims, and that sometimes makes it a bit more challenging to find them. So I know that's like one example of how it's a bit different compared to like other countries. So do you have like other examples, or you can speak more on that?
Yeah. Look, I think it's for everything from, our geographical landscape. Where do people commit crimes? Well, we have large open areas out in the veldt, and that's where your serials are killing their victims. Whereas in America, serials killing their victims in houses and dumping their bodies out in in other places. So that's one aspect which makes our crimes different. A lot of our offenders are, we have a huge unemployed population or low income population, and that, they don't have cars. So now you have to factor in your modus operandi, that you can't just plump a dead body into your car and drive it off into the desert. So, that alters how they approach their victims and how they have to use a con story to lure their victims away. So I think those kind of things. And then like our police service, we don't have murder units. It's often one detective on his own or her own having to deal with a bunch of cases. And that kind of alters how and what people do, how people do things. We have national police compared to America, where every little town, it's its own little police force. Every little police station is its own little police force with its own funding from the local taxpayers. That alters how they can operate. Whereas we have a national police service. So you're a cop in Joburg, whether you travel down to Cape Town, you're still a cop and have policing rights, but not in America if you leave. So I think those are unique things that sometimes help and sometimes hinder when we deal with crimes.
Do you find that when you see crime, like drama out of South Africa, we're starting to see, the odd Netflix series where it's, the cop on the beat, that it's kind of like an American version of crime told in, just with South African people, but the context still doesn't feel authentically South African. I've not seen anything that feels authentically South African and kind of accounts for all of the stuff you were just talking about there. And that's kind of feels ingrained in the nature of the story, Do you agree? It's like we do American cop shows, they just happen to be in South Africa with South African actors, you know what I mean? As opposed to really kind of getting the nuance of South African criminals and crime and the context that we find ourselves in, etc. Okay, guys. Well, I think we can go for a few more minutes until past, I guess. I like this one comment here that I wanted to bring up from Chantel. Women are good at covering up. Maybe that's why there aren't many female serial killers documented. You see, that's it. Is it that women are getting away with it, Gerard? Because us guys are just too impulsive.
It could be. It could be that women march the nuts and do it in a way that we don't catch them. You never know. That's definitely an option.
Is it true like how most female killers would use like poison as opposed to physically killing their victims, like strangling them or like shooting them?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to overcome your victim if they're, your partner, etc. So sometimes I know quite a few cases I've worked on where it was poison. The wife or girlfriend used the poison, or they get someone else to do it. That third party that's going to. Rosemary Ndlovu, I mean, most of her stuff was a third person.
Yeah. Where do you stand on this, guys? Should the death penalty be reinstated? And which case should have been given if it was available? Well, especially the first part. I don't know if you want to bring up specific cases, but where do you stand on death penalty? Just generally.
Want to go first?
I don't like the idea of choosing whether someone lives or dies. So I think for me, just life in prison seems the most humane, even if what they did wasn't humane.
Yeah, absolutely. Gerard?
Yeah, look, I don't think it's going to change. So I think our constitution is written in a way it'll take a lot to change it to allow death penalty. I can't see the government ever going that route. Also, you have to keep in mind, do you trust the criminal justice system to be working effectively? From the policing point of view, the magistrates, the judges, what are the levels of corruption? Because you can't undo a death penalty. Once you've hanged someone, that's it. You can't go back later and say, "Oops, we made a mistake."
Yeah.
And also, it's been shown that it doesn't necessarily drop your crime rates. It's never going to stop things like intimate partner murders, because those are just about intense emotions, and people at those point in time often just don't care about the outcomes. And also, if we don't think you're going to get caught, you can have a punishment where you get pulled apart by horses, but if I don't think I'm going to get caught and convicted, it doesn't mean anything to me. So it's a whole complicated question that you'd have to have a whole bunch of things working properly for it to even have any kind of impact. And it would still probably have quite a lot of murders. For what kinds of crimes, which was the other question, personally, I think rape. You should get the death sentence if you rape someone. That's my personal view. And for some murders, yeah.
Okay. My stance is just that I feel like we've maybe evolved beyond that as a species, and we can dream of. I say we shoot people into space. That's something like that. Somebody can get Elon proud. Make something, do something proudly South African space ejector system. Lauren says death penalty. Who would you trust to make that decision? And I think that is, it is the fallibility of humanity in the mix. Makes it a lot more complicated, doesn't it? Do we have a sexual offender list for the public to view?
No. It's only accessible for schools who need to employ someone. There's very limited access to that. I think there was discussion about making it public access, but at this point, no.
We've had a couple of people ask about the Tabo Bester case. Just your thoughts on that, Gerard. Here did an interview with Tabo Bester. Will he be able to do a follow-up outside of SAPS? Would you be able to...
I'd love to. Whether his attorneys would let me near him, I seriously doubt it. I've had quite strong views about Tabo in the few times I've been interviewed about his case. But I personally would love to interview him. I'd love to interview, perhaps even more so, his ex-partner, Khudumana. I just think it'd be great to, how on earth did she get involved with this guy? She was a very, very intelligent, successful woman. So I'm more fascinated. Maybe because I've interviewed Tabo, I'm more interested in interviewing her at this point in time. But yeah, interesting case. I think a lot's still going to come out about that.
Yeah, so you can put the pieces together. Okay, Tshego, last question for Gerard. Have you got one more for us? Or have we drained the question bank?
I think my last one would just be, how did you get to where you are today? Because I think you have accomplished so much in your life. So just how did you get to where you are? And anything that you think will help me in some way.
Yeah.
Hard work, luck, always continue to try and learn, and be a good person. I think, if you are a good person, the universe does look after you,
Yeah.
Simple.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Wow. Great, man. I love this. I'm really enjoying this. Is a first for all of us, isn't it? And it's just nice to kind of, it's something we have this thing in common that we're trying to tell interesting stories to people. And it's just so nice to connect and talk about that and to talk about the subjects that, the subject that we're so interested in. And just how we can all be kind of successful together and how we can deliver a great product to the audiences out there, etc. On that, I did mention earlier, thank you so much for watching the Stuart Vilken episode. You can check it out on Profiler Africa on the channel. Please do go and see it if you haven't. It's a great 50-minute look at the case. This week, we will be dropping another case. And just FYI, we're going to be, last week we released the episode for everyone. This week we'll be releasing, our members will get early access. So you'll be able to, so if you've signed up as a member, it's just R39.99. You can just hit join there, or you'll find it on the page. And then in a week's time, we'll be opening up that episode to the general public. So if you want early access, you're welcome to join us as a member and check out this week's case. Here's a little teaser. What this week's case will be.
Norwood was where I fell in love. Norwood was a village.
So we've always had serial murder in South Africa.
One of the first serial murderers that flung himself into the public spotlight.
The body of an adult black female was found.
He throttled her, hit her over the head with a brick, and set her body alight.
He goes there with the intention to actually rape the victim.
The women moved out, moved in with their parents, with their boyfriends.
He then puts the gun against her head and fires the shot and kills her.
The people in the Norwood community were gobsmacked. They were terrified. They were living on edge. So it became a ghost town.
Okay, so guys, that'll be dropping this Thursday for our members, and then in a week's time, it'll be open to everybody. So please do become a member of the channel and support local true crime creators. Also, please do become a member on, go over, subscribe, check out what Tshego is doing. At Tshego Paledi is the place that you will find it if you just hit that into your search bar on YouTube. Gerard, the case that we're going to be playing this week, you had a little bit of, we're going to say goodbye to you because you got to get out of here. Quick sticks. Just your thoughts on the Norwood case. Just a little, give us a little plug on what our viewers can expect from that story. I mean, you had...
Yeah, it's a nice blast from the past, from a case that a lot of people heard of but don't necessarily know the actual details. It was the early days before we really had the word serial murder in South Africa, before we had the investigative psychology section. And yeah, unique because he was a policeman at the time. So, and that was intimately wound into his cases and crimes. So yeah, that's quite fascinating. And I got to interview him years ago. So
you got to interview him. Yeah, you did that as part of your research, as part of your studies. Yeah, that was back when you were a student, Gerard. And Mickey was kind of getting the forensic psychology unit up and running, I would imagine, around that time as well.
No, he wasn't.
Or a bit later, actually. Yeah, actually, you're right.
He did that in 94.
It does bridge an interesting period in South African history as well, that transition period. And interesting, we've spoken about on tonight's episode how the nature of crime is interesting contextually when you start looking at some of the nuance. If in the promo you saw one of the photographs of his first victim, who was a black domestic worker, neighbor to his parents' house, and you see there that the photographs were taken in black and white for the black victims, and they would use color photos for the white victims, because in those days the police wouldn't spend the money on processing color film for black victims. So some of those, again, dark but interesting kind of nuances that you come across in South African crime stories. Tshego, Gerard, you can jump off if you like. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you've got to get to stuff there, and I'll just...
Everybody got to go.
Yeah, enjoy it. Bring us back some... What are you bringing us back? Bring us back some ice skates or something.
Maple syrup.
Okay, maple syrup. There you go. I want one of those nice Mountie hats. I want to do the show in a Mountie hat. Bring us back something nice from Canada, okay? Travel safe there, Gerard. We'll see you...
Being on the show.
Thank you.
Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Gerard.
Cheers, everybody.
Okay, so there goes Gerard. Tshego, we'll just say goodnight to everyone quickly. Thank you so much for joining us. I've really enjoyed this. It's been really awesome. It's so nice to, like I say, it's great to be, we talk about wanting to be a part of the kind of content creation community. It's nice to actually start really enacting that. And I'm really excited about this idea of getting a bunch of us together and doing it. Every now and again, we do like a special where all of us just jump on and we chat and we talk crime, talk about current cases, talk about past older cases, get some of Gerard's kind of, true crime nerd buddies on that know all the facts and everything, and we can pick their brains.
That sounds very exciting.
Just final words for anyone that's kind of catching, that hasn't yet subscribed to your channel, hasn't seen what it is that you do. What's that plug? What are people going to get? Why must people immediately head over to Tshego Paledi land?
I feel like I should subscribe because I cover South African crime cases. I'm a Black woman in the true crime space, and it's been challenging to start. I think I do a really good job, and I have over 44,000 subscribers. I've been doing it for 5 years. I'm growing, and I hope you guys come along this journey with me as we continue to grow. And one day you'll find me on TV.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Look, we're going to talk about that. Okay. We'll knock out. I'm good at knocking out TV concepts. Okay. So we'll put our heads together and see what we can put together. I've been doing lots of that for the last 25 years. Tshego, thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for watching across both channels. If you've not seen Profiler Africa before, we're also a place where you can check out great South African true crime stories. We do a live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Where you can join in the chat, as you can see, and pose your questions. It's always interesting to pick Gerard's brain, and we have some great guests on here as well. Next week, we're going to be talking to a guy who is an arson expert in California. So we're going to be heading over to the States and speaking to one of America's top arson investigators. So I know that last week we said we were going to do that. This week I got a bit muddled up. That's going to be next week. So please do tune in for that. Like I say, subscribe to the channels. We appreciate you guys for watching. I am going to leave you guys with a clip from the episode that we are dropping on the Norwood serial killer of South African serial. The first episode on Stuart Vilken is available to stream right now. The Norwood episode will drop on Thursday and for our members, and then it'll be open to everyone a week from now. Thank you so much for a week after that. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Tshego. We'll be seeing you again soon. It's been one of those, the one thing that happens is that we sometimes get people saying that I talk too much, and it's one of those nights where I've done more talking. Where I've done more talking than normal. Next week, I will revert to doing my best not to talk too much. Thanks, Tshego. Stay well, and we'll chat soon, okay?
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Okay, and here's a little clip from Norwood, guys, to tease the episode.
At the time of the Norwood murder series, which really spanned from 1989 to 1992.
The term serial killer had already become very much part of popular culture in America, for example, in Canada, in other countries, but it hadn't been part of popular culture in South Africa. So it was combustible. It was the people in the Norwood community were gobsmacked. They were terrified. They were living on edge. The Norwood killer was probably at the cusp, or towards the cusp, one of the first serial murderers that flung himself into the public spotlight over that time.
So on the 12th of May, 1989, around about 9 o'clock in the morning, the body of an adult black female was found. She was found partially naked on the floor. The top half of her body and portions of the room had been set on fire, and the cause of death appeared to be strangulation and possibly also inhalation of smoke.
She was 22. She was working as a domestic worker for neighbors of his parents, and he climbed over the wall and throttled her, hit her over the head with a brick, and set her body alight.
Now, if you look at the police crime scene photograph in 1989, it was a black and white photograph. So what would happen is that black victims would be photographed with black and white film, and white victims would be photographed with colors film. So even you see a bit of the racial dynamics of South Africa at the time interplay in how the police would document crime scenes.
He burned her. He might have had sex with her, and maybe he was embarrassed because he was a white cop and she was a black domestic worker.
So this particular crime went unsolved for just over 2 years. Now, whether it was a case of the police not really putting much effort into it, or whether there weren't necessarily lots of forensic clues on this particular crime scene, I'm not too sure.
And at that point, the police couldn't even tell me whether she'd been raped or not. I don't even think they bothered to check.
Again, I think nowadays, as opposed to back in 1989, we would definitely be concerned that this has been a sexually motivated murder, that this could then be something that's going to be repeated again, and we have to look out for that in that general area around this particular crime scene.
I only found out about her after I covered the plethora of rapes and murders in Norwood and outside Norwood. I mean, I only realized then that she had been his first victim.
I am a human being and I killed human beings.
Before I knew it, I'd fired 4 shots at the door. I kept on shouting forever to phone the police.
Tests are underway to determine if a serial killer is on the loose in Centurion, Pretoria.
The dead won't bother you. It's the living you gotta worry about.